Hashtag the psychology of being a loner. Hashtag introduction. What if everything you've been told about being alone is wrong? For decades, society has celebrated the extrovert, the outgoing student, the charismatic leader, the life of every party. From childhood, many of us hear the same message. Go make friends. Don't sit by yourself. You need to be more social. Somewhere along the way, being alone became something to fix. But psychology tells a much more complicated story. Because not everyone who spends time alone is lonely. In fact, some of the world's most creative artists, brilliant scientists, accomplished writers, and deep thinkers deliberately sought solitude. Albert Einstein often took long solitary walks to think. Isaac Newton produced some of his greatest discoveries during periods of isolation. Nikola Tesla believed that many of his inventions were born in complete solitude. History repeatedly shows us something surprising. Being alone is not necessarily a weakness. Sometimes, it is a powerful cognitive advantage. Yet there is another side to this story. Because solitude and loneliness are not the same thing. One can strengthen the mind. The other can quietly destroy it. Understanding the difference may be one of the most important psychological skills you will ever learn. Modern neuroscience has discovered that the human brain behaves differently when we are alone. Our attention changes. Our creativity changes. Even the brain's communication networks begin working in unique ways that are rarely active during constant social interaction. But the effects depend entirely on one question. Are you choosing to be alone? Or are you trapped in loneliness? This distinction changes everything. Throughout this journey, we'll explore what psychology, neuroscience, and decades of scientific research reveal about loners. We'll uncover why some people genuinely recharge in solitude while others experience emotional pain. We'll examine the surprising benefits of spending time alone, the hidden risks of chronic isolation, and the personality traits that make some individuals naturally seek solitude more than others. You'll also discover why highly independent people are often misunderstood. Why intelligent individuals sometimes prefer fewer relationships. Why social media can make loneliness worse instead of better. And how to know whether your own desire for solitude is healthy, or a warning sign that shouldn't be ignored. By the end, you may never think about being alone in the same way again. Because the greatest mystery isn't why some people avoid crowds. The real mystery is this. Can a person be completely alone and still live a deeply fulfilling life? Let's explore what science has to say. Hashtag solitude is not the same as loneliness. Most people use the words alone and lonely as if they mean the same thing. Psychology says they do not. In fact, they describe two completely different experiences. You can be surrounded by hundreds of people and still feel profoundly lonely. Or you can spend an entire weekend by yourself and feel perfectly content. The difference isn't the number of people around you. The difference is how your brain interprets your social experience. Researchers define loneliness as the painful feeling that your social relationships are less satisfying than you want them to be. It is a subjective experience. Being physically isolated does not automatically make someone lonely. Likewise, having many friends does not guarantee freedom from loneliness. This explains why celebrities, executives, and even people with large families sometimes describe feeling completely alone. Their social needs are not being met. On the other hand, many people who identify as loners report something very different. They enjoy their own company. For them, solitude isn't an absence of connection. It's a source of recovery. One of the most influential findings in modern psychology is that chosen solitude and forced isolation affect the brain in completely different ways. When you choose to spend time alone, your body often becomes calmer. Stress hormones decrease. Mental fatigue begins to recover. Attention improves. Many people experience a greater sense of emotional control. But when isolation is unwanted, the opposite happens. The brain interprets prolonged loneliness as a potential survival threat. This reaction has deep evolutionary roots. For most of human history, survival depended on belonging to a group. Being separated from others often meant greater danger from predators, starvation, or conflict. As a result, the human brain evolved to treat unwanted social isolation as something worth paying attention to. Studies have found that chronic loneliness is associated with higher levels of the stress hormone cortisol, poorer sleep quality, increased anxiety, and a greater risk of depression over time. In other words, the brain doesn't simply notice loneliness. It reacts to it biologically. This distinction helps explain why many loners are misunderstood. Someone who spends Friday night reading a book instead of attending a party may appear lonely from the outside. But appearances can be deceiving. If that solitude is freely chosen, it can actually increase well-being. Research has shown that people who intentionally spend quiet time alone often report feeling more refreshed afterward, especially if they use that time for meaningful activities like reading, creating art, walking in nature, journaling, or simply thinking without distraction. The key word is intentional. Healthy solitude is a choice. Loneliness often feels like a trap. Another common misconception is that loners dislike people. Many don't. Some deeply value relationships. They simply prefer fewer of them. Psychologists often describe this as valuing relationship quality over relationship quantity. A person may have only 2 or 3 close friends, yet feel completely socially fulfilled. Another person may know hundreds of people, yet feel emotionally disconnected. The size of your social circle tells us surprisingly little about your psychological well-being. Interestingly, neuroscience has begun revealing what happens inside the brain during periods of quiet solitude. When external demands become smaller, the brain often activates what researchers call the default mode network. This network becomes more active during reflection, daydreaming, autobiographical memory, future planning, and self-understanding. Rather than doing nothing, the brain is actually performing some of its most important internal work. It connects experiences, processes emotions, builds identity, imagines possibilities. This may explain why many people report their best ideas arriving during solitary walks, quiet showers, or peaceful moments without constant interruption. Sometimes, the mind becomes clearer only after the world grows quieter. So before asking whether someone spends too much time alone, a better question might be this: are they peacefully choosing solitude, or silently suffering from loneliness? Psychology tells us that the answer makes all the difference. In the next section, we'll explore why some people naturally enjoy solitude more than others, and what personality science reveals about the true nature of a loner. ## Why some people naturally prefer solitude. Have you ever wondered why one person feels energized after spending hours at a party, while another can't wait to go home and be alone? The answer isn't simply personality. It's also biology. Modern psychology suggests that our preference for social interaction exists on a spectrum, shaped by genetics, temperament, life experiences, and even the way our brains respond to stimulation. This doesn't mean your personality is fixed forever. But it does mean some people are naturally more comfortable with solitude than others. One of the most studied personality models in psychology is the Big 5 personality traits. Among these 5 traits, one stands out when discussing loners: extroversion. People who score high in extroversion often gain energy from social interaction. Conversations, group activities, and busy environments tend to stimulate them. By contrast, people who score lower in extroversion, often called introverts, usually recharge through quieter settings. It's important to understand what this does not mean. Being introverted does not mean being shy. It does not mean being socially anxious. And it certainly does not mean disliking people. An introvert may enjoy deep conversations with close friends but feel mentally exhausted after hours of small talk. An extrovert may love meeting new people but still appreciate quiet moments alone. The difference lies in how each person's nervous system responds to stimulation. Psychologists have proposed that introverts and extroverts process stimulation differently. Research suggests that people who prefer solitude often become mentally saturated more quickly in noisy, crowded, or highly stimulating environments. Imagine your brain as a cup. For some people, it takes a great deal of activity to fill that cup. For others, it fills much faster. Neither is better. They're simply different. When the cup overflows, many loners instinctively seek silence, not because they dislike others, but because they need time to mentally reset. There's another fascinating factor at play: sensitivity. Some individuals naturally notice more details than others. A loud restaurant, bright lights, background conversations, subtle changes in someone's facial expression. These people are often described in psychology as having higher sensory sensitivity. While this heightened awareness can make someone more observant and empathetic, it also means social environments can become mentally draining more quickly. Spending time alone gives the brain an opportunity to process all of that incoming information. Life experiences matter, too. Not every loner was born that way. Some people gradually grow to value solitude after repeated disappointments, betrayals, or emotionally exhausting relationships. Others discover that being alone allows them to think more clearly, pursue meaningful hobbies, or recover from chronic stress. Psychologists caution against assuming every preference for solitude stems from emotional wounds. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't. Choosing solitude after reflection is very different from withdrawing because of fear. The motivation matters. Interestingly, several studies have found that people who enjoy solitude often score higher on measures of self-reflection. They tend to spend more time examining their thoughts, values, and long-term goals. This habit can promote personal growth, but only if it remains balanced. Too much self-reflection can become rumination, where the mind repeatedly circles the same worries without finding solutions. Healthy solitude encourages insight. Unhealthy isolation can trap us in endless overthinking. Many people also assume that loners lack social skills. Science doesn't support that stereotype. Some people who prefer being alone are excellent communicators. They simply choose when and with whom they socialize. Instead of seeking many acquaintances, they often invest deeply in a handful of meaningful relationships. For them, authenticity matters more than popularity. Depth matters more than frequency. Perhaps the most important lesson is this: a preference for solitude is not something that needs to be cured. It's one of the many ways human beings differ from one another. Just as some people thrive in busy cities while others prefer quiet countryside. Some minds flourish amid constant interaction. Others produce their best ideas in silence. Neither path is inherently healthier than the other. The real question isn't whether you enjoy being alone. It's whether your solitude is helping you grow, or quietly holding you back. In the next section, we'll explore one of the most surprising discoveries in psychology: why periods of solitude can improve creativity, problem solving, and even the way the brain understands itself. ## What happens to the brain when you're alone? Imagine sitting alone in a quiet room. No phone. No television. No music. No conversations. Just silence. At first, many people become uncomfortable. Their minds begin to wander. Random memories appear. Old conversations replay. Future plans begin to form. It may feel as though your brain is doing nothing. In reality, it's doing some of its most important work. Neuroscientists have discovered that the brain doesn't simply switch off when we're alone. Instead, a network of interconnected brain regions becomes especially active. This system is known as the default mode network, often abbreviated as the DMN. For many years, scientists believed this network represented an idle brain. Today, we know that assumption was wrong. The default mode network becomes active when your attention turns inward. It helps you reflect on your experiences. Imagine future possibilities. Recall personal memories. Understand your emotions. And even think about the thoughts and feelings of other people. In many ways, it is the brain's internal storytelling system. This may explain why so many breakthroughs happen during moments of solitude. Have you ever struggled with a difficult problem for hours, only to suddenly find the answer while taking a shower? Or walking alone? Or lying in bed before falling asleep? Psychologists call this the incubation effect. When you stop consciously forcing a solution, the brain continues processing the problem in the background. Without distractions, different ideas begin connecting in new ways. What feels like a sudden flash of inspiration is often the result of quiet mental work that has been happening all along. Many highly creative people intentionally protect periods of uninterrupted solitude. Not because creativity requires loneliness, but because creativity often requires uninterrupted thought. Constant notifications, conversations, and digital distractions repeatedly interrupt the brain's ability to make deeper connections. Every interruption forces your attention to reset. Over time, this can reduce your ability to engage in sustained thinking. In contrast, even 20 or 30 minutes of uninterrupted quiet can allow your mind to explore ideas more freely. Researchers have also found that intentional solitude can improve emotional regulation. When you're constantly responding to other people's needs, opinions, and expectations, your emotional system rarely gets an opportunity to reset. Quiet time allows the brain to process unresolved emotions instead of continuously postponing them. This doesn't mean every moment alone feels peaceful. Sometimes solitude brings uncomfortable thoughts to the surface. But facing those thoughts can be healthier than endlessly distracting yourself from them. Emotional growth often begins with honest self-awareness. There's another surprising benefit. Periods of quiet reflection help strengthen what psychologists call self-concept clarity. In simple terms, you become more certain about who you are. When we spend every waking moment responding to social expectations, it's easy to confuse other people's opinions with our own values. Solitude creates psychological space. Space to ask difficult questions. What do I actually enjoy? What kind of life do I want? What beliefs truly belong to me? Without occasional silence, those questions are easily drowned out by the noise of everyday life. However, psychology also warns against assuming that more solitude is always better. Like many things in life, the benefits depend on balance. A short period of chosen solitude can reduce stress, improve concentration, and encourage creativity. Months of unwanted isolation can have the opposite effect. Research has linked prolonged loneliness to increased anxiety, depression, chronic stress, poorer sleep, and even reduced cognitive performance over time. The same quiet room that helps one person recharge can become emotionally painful for someone who longs for meaningful connection. Again, the difference is choice. Healthy solitude restores the mind. Loneliness gradually exhausts it. Perhaps this is why some of history's greatest thinkers treated solitude as a practice rather than an escape. They didn't withdraw from the world because they hated people. They stepped away temporarily, so they could return with clearer thoughts, better ideas, and a deeper understanding of themselves. The brain needs conversation, but it also needs silence. Without both, something important is missing. In the next section, we'll examine one of the most misunderstood beliefs in psychology, the claim that highly intelligent people prefer being alone, and what the scientific evidence actually says. Are intelligent people more likely to be loners? One of the most popular beliefs in psychology is this: the smarter you are, the less you need other people. You'll find this idea repeated in books, social media posts, and motivational videos. It sounds convincing. It even feels true. After all, many famous inventors, philosophers, scientists, and writers were known for spending long periods in solitude. But what does science actually say? The answer is far more interesting than a simple yes or no. One study that received widespread attention examined the relationship between intelligence, social interaction, and life satisfaction. Researchers found that, on average, most people reported greater happiness when they spent more time with friends. This wasn't surprising. Human beings are social creatures, and meaningful relationships generally contribute to well-being. However, there was an intriguing exception. Participants with higher levels of cognitive ability appeared to be less affected by frequent social interaction when it came to their overall life satisfaction. In other words, they often didn't rely on constant socializing to feel content. This finding generated headlines claiming that intelligent people prefer being alone. But that interpretation goes too far. The research did not conclude that intelligent people dislike others. Instead, it suggested they may simply have different social needs. One explanation comes from the way attention works. People deeply focused on long-term goals, whether scientific research, writing, entrepreneurship, music, or other demanding pursuits, often protect their time carefully. Every conversation, every meeting, every notification, every social obligation. All of these require mental energy. For someone intensely absorbed in a meaningful project, too much social activity can interrupt deep concentration. Solitude becomes less about avoiding people and more about protecting focus. Psychologists also distinguish between being socially selective and being socially isolated. Many highly reflective individuals don't seek large social circles. Instead, they invest deeply in a small number of trusted relationships. Rather than knowing hundreds of people, they may prefer 2 or 3 friends with whom they can have honest, intellectually stimulating conversations. Research consistently shows that the quality of relationships matters far more than the quantity. A handful of meaningful connections often contributes more to well-being than dozens of superficial ones. There's another reason thoughtful people may appear distant. Curiosity. People who enjoy learning often spend significant amounts of time reading, researching, creating, or practicing skills. These activities naturally require uninterrupted periods of concentration. From the outside, this behavior may look antisocial. From the inside, it often feels deeply fulfilling. The person isn't withdrawing from people because they dislike them. They're moving towards something that gives their life meaning. Of course, intelligence offers no protection against loneliness. A brilliant scientist can feel isolated. A gifted artist can struggle with depression. An accomplished writer can long for deeper relationships. Being intellectually capable doesn't eliminate the human need for connection. In fact, some highly intelligent individuals report feeling misunderstood because they struggle to find people who share similar interests or ways of thinking. When meaningful conversations are rare, solitude can feel more rewarding than shallow interaction. Psychologists also warn against romanticizing loneliness as a sign of intelligence. Choosing to spend time alone doesn't automatically make someone wise. Likewise, enjoying social gatherings doesn't make someone less intelligent. These stereotypes oversimplify human personality. There are brilliant extroverts. There are highly creative introverts. There are thoughtful people who love crowds. And there are quiet individuals who simply enjoy peace. Personality and intelligence are related in complex ways, but neither determines the other. Perhaps the real lesson is this. Highly intelligent people don't necessarily avoid relationships. They often become more intentional about them. They ask different questions. Who truly understands me? Who challenges my thinking? Who brings peace instead of constant drama? As we grow, many of us discover that meaningful connection isn't measured by the number of people around us. It's measured by how deeply we can be ourselves in the presence of another person. And sometimes, the most valuable relationship you'll ever build is the one you have with your own mind. In the next section, we'll explore when a healthy preference for solitude quietly crosses the line into harmful isolation, and the psychological warning signs that should never be ignored. #when solitude becomes harmful. There comes a point when being alone stops healing and starts hurting. The challenge is that the transition is often so gradual we don't notice it. One day, you're enjoying a quiet evening at home. Months later, you've stopped answering messages. You avoid phone calls. You cancel plans. You convince yourself you simply prefer being alone. Sometimes that's true. Sometimes it's something much deeper. Psychology encourages us to ask one important question. Are you moving toward peace? Or away from pain? The answer often reveals the difference between healthy solitude and harmful isolation. Healthy solitude is intentional. You choose it because it helps you think, recover, create, or recharge. Afterward, you usually feel calmer, more focused, more emotionally balanced. You still have the ability to connect with others when you want to. You simply don't need constant interaction to feel complete. Isolation, however, often begins as avoidance. You stop replying because it feels easier. You avoid gatherings because you're emotionally exhausted. You tell yourself you'll reconnect next week. Then next week becomes next month. Eventually, your world grows smaller without you realizing it. Psychologists have found that chronic loneliness doesn't just affect emotions. It can influence the body as well. People experiencing prolonged loneliness often report poorer sleep, increased fatigue, difficulty concentrating, and greater sensitivity to stress. Some studies have even linked long-term loneliness with higher risks for cardiovascular disease, weakened immune function, and cognitive decline later in life. This doesn't mean spending time alone is dangerous. It means persistent loneliness can become a significant source of stress for both the mind and body. Another warning sign is losing interest in things that once brought joy. Imagine someone who used to love painting, hiking, reading, or cooking. Gradually, they stop doing those things. Not because they found new passions, but because nothing feels worthwhile anymore. Psychologists call this anhedonia, a reduced ability to experience pleasure. While anhedonia can occur for many reasons, including depression, it reminds us that isolation isn't always a preference. Sometimes it's a symptom. There's also a difference between protecting your energy and building emotional walls. Healthy boundaries allow you to choose relationships that are respectful and supportive. Emotional walls prevent anyone from getting close, even people who genuinely care. Many individuals who have experienced betrayal, rejection, or prolonged stress begin avoiding closeness as a form of self-protection. In the short term, it can feel safe. In the long term, it can prevent healing. The mind starts believing that distance is the only way to avoid being hurt again. Modern technology has made this problem more complicated. We can spend hours scrolling through social media, watching videos, or exchanging short messages without experiencing genuine connection. Our brains receive constant stimulation, yet very little emotional nourishment. You can be digitally surrounded by thousands of people and still feel deeply isolated. Psychologists sometimes describe this as the difference between social contact and social connection. One is simply interaction. The other is feeling understood, accepted, and valued. Only the second truly protects against loneliness. So how do you know whether your solitude is still healthy? Ask yourself a few honest questions. When I'm alone, do I usually feel restored, or emotionally drained? Am I choosing solitude because it helps me grow, or because I'm afraid of disappointment? If someone I deeply trusted invited me to spend time together, would I genuinely want to? Or would I feel unable to accept? These questions aren't meant to judge you. They're meant to help you understand where you are. Perhaps the healthiest form of solitude is one that remains flexible. You can enjoy your own company. You can appreciate silence. You can spend meaningful time alone. But you also remain open to authentic human connection when it appears. Strength isn't measured by never needing anyone. Nor is it measured by constantly surrounding yourself with people. Real psychological resilience is the ability to move comfortably between solitude and connection, choosing each one when it serves your well-being. In the final section, we'll bring everything together and explore what psychology teaches us about embracing solitude without becoming lost in it, and why learning to enjoy your own company may be one of the greatest forms of emotional freedom. #the quiet strength of a loner. If there's one lesson psychology has taught us, it's this. Being a loner is not a personality flaw. It's not a diagnosis. And it's certainly not something that automatically needs to be fixed. Like many aspects of human behavior, its impact depends on why it exists and how it shapes your life. Throughout this journey, we've seen that science makes an important distinction. Solitude is a choice. Loneliness is an emotional state. One can restore the mind. The other can slowly wear it down. Understanding the difference changes the way we think about ourselves and the people around us. We've also learned that some individuals are naturally drawn to quieter environments. Their brains may become overstimulated more quickly. They often value deep conversations over casual small talk. They may prefer a handful of meaningful relationships instead of a large social circle. None of these traits make a person better or worse. They simply reflect the incredible diversity of human personality. Just as some people recharge by being around others, some recharge by spending time alone. Perhaps one of the most valuable gifts of healthy solitude is self-knowledge. When the noise of the outside world becomes quieter, we begin to hear our own thoughts more clearly. We notice what truly matters to us. We become more aware of our emotions. We reflect on our mistakes. We imagine new possibilities. We discover values that aren't borrowed from social expectations but genuinely belong to us. These moments of quiet reflection often become the foundation for wiser decisions and deeper personal growth. At the same time, psychology reminds us that human connection remains one of our greatest psychological needs. Even people who love solitude often benefit from a few relationships built on trust, respect, and authenticity. Research consistently shows that it's not the number of friends that predicts well-being. It's the quality of those relationships. One person who truly understands you can matter more than 100 casual acquaintances. Connection and solitude are not opposites. In a healthy life, they complement one another. In today's world, where constant notifications compete for our attention and social comparison is only a swipe away, choosing intentional moments of silence has become increasingly rare. Yet those quiet moments may be exactly what many of us need. A walk without your phone. A morning spent reading. An evening reflecting on the day. Time in nature. Writing your thoughts in a journal. These simple practices give the brain an opportunity to recover from continuous stimulation and reconnect with what matters most. Sometimes, productivity begins with stillness. Sometimes, clarity begins with silence. If you recognize yourself as a loner, perhaps the goal isn't to become more outgoing simply because society expects it. Instead, ask yourself better questions. Does my solitude leave me feeling peaceful or empty? Am I building a meaningful life, or hiding from difficult emotions? Do I have at least one or two people I can trust when life becomes overwhelming? The healthiest loners are not those who reject the world. They are the ones who know when to step away and when to step back in. Ultimately, psychology doesn't ask us to choose between being alone or being social. It encourages us to develop the flexibility to enjoy both. To appreciate quiet without fearing connection. To value relationships without depending entirely on them for our happiness. To feel comfortable in our own company while remaining open to others. Because emotional maturity isn't measured by how many people surround you. It's measured by whether you can find peace both in solitude and in the presence of those who truly matter. So the next time you see someone sitting alone in a cafe, walking quietly through a park, or choosing a peaceful evening over a crowded gathering, remember this. They may not be lonely. They may simply have discovered something many people spend their entire lives searching for. The ability to enjoy their own company. And perhaps that quiet confidence is one of the strongest forms of psychological well-being there is. Thank you for listening. Take care of your mind, embrace the moments of silence that help you grow, and remember, sometimes the most meaningful conversation you'll ever have is the one you have with yourself.